Hello everyone and welcome to my coloring corner. Today is Sunday, and this is going to be the new day that we add the tutorial videos. So this is the next step in our adult coloring from the beginning. And because we're using alcohol markers on the channel this week and throughout the month, I wanted to touch base with different types of markers and how to use them. Well, how I use them. I am not um, perfect, I guess is the word, with any type of marker. So this is going to be the basics where I'm at, not where people like Jazza, Sarah Renee Clark, Belinda from Color with Faithful Girl, Emily from Emily Illustrator, all of those people that do absolutely gorgeous work with markers. Um, we're not there yet. So we will take a look at the different kinds of markers. There's 4 different types of markers that are on the market that a lot of different people use. Different ones do different things. Different ones need different paper. And we're going to get further into that. I have printed a test sheet here on basic Neenah cardstock, and I'm going to show you why here in just a moment, and the different things that different markers will do with just plain Neenah cardstock. Now, if you're going to use markers in your coloring books, I strongly suggest that you put a heavy piece of cardstock behind your picture, or with alcohol markers especially, they come with a little piece of plastic. Put that behind your picture. The reason for the plastic behind the picture, there is a reason for it, and basically what it does is it gives you that ability to blend the markers a little bit better before it completely absorbs into the paper. So I strongly suggest that you use those tools that do come with your markers. All right, so we're going to not do that. I have a glass mat behind my papers, so the glass will react the same way as that piece of plastic or rubbery plastic that you find in marker boxes, bags, things like that. All right, so let's get started on the different types of markers. So these ones here are a watercolor brush pen. So this is water-based ink, so it's pigment with water as your base. Now, these are very different from water-based markers. The difference between the water-based pens and the water-based markers is, of course, this little tiny, wonderful little paintbrush. So this is fantastic for getting into those details and that sort of thing. One thing that I will say about these is that you do need to blend them with water, and we will talk about blending and that sort of thing a little later on. But this is the first type of marker that you will come across with coloring. As a child, you probably used a water-based marker or a brush pen on your colorings. Now this is very different than a water-based marker. So the brush pens are great. There is other things out there called water-based markers. Now the water-based marker does still have a brush tip. This is the Indra Creative set, and I like this set because it's a large set. It comes in its own little carrying case, and they have a really good nib on them. So we've got a brush nib, which is a fantastic size nib, as well as our bullet tip or our fine tip. Now this is a very fine tip, so getting into those little areas, drawing those little lines is very easy to do. The difference between this and this, of course, visually it's very different. The tip on this is a paintbrush. It's got hair, just like your paintbrush would. The tip on this is a felt marker. So just like you would with your Crayola markers, this has that tip. So those are the differences. They do work about the same way. So with a water-based marker, you can blend that utilizing a water brush or water and that sort of thing. So the difference between these two here, other than the tips, is not a lot in the ink composure. So it's composed of a pigment that is dissolved in water. All right, so those are the two water-based. And we're going to move those over here so we can have a little bit more room. Over here. Get over there. Okay. The next ones we're going to look at are acrylic markers. Now, the acrylic markers are a acrylic paint. This is not a water-based or a alcohol-based marker. This is a marker that has paint in it. So they are very different. They do blend by layering. So when you put one layer on top of another, you will be able to blend those colors together. Now, I use these a lot more for details, for when I want those lines to disappear, because they're usually quite heavy, and they can eliminate a line from your work. So that's what I use those for. Now the last ones we're going to look at is the alcohol markers. So this is my Ohuhu alcohol markers. There are several different brands of markers. The Ohuhus are one of the higher end brands. The highest, the Cadillac of alcohol markers is the Copic markers. Now, I have a few Copics. I don't have a whole lot of them because I don't do sellable art with markers. So I don't feel the need to purchase something that I'm not going to use as often as somebody who does marker work for their art as a saleable thing, or if they only use markers, that sort of thing. Now, the alcohol markers can be used in your coloring books as long as you put something behind it. Now, I would not suggest coloring in a coloring book with an alcohol marker without putting something between your pages, even after it's dry. I have found out from experience that certain markers, I don't know exactly which ones I used, but I know it was a lower end marker, will stain your paper as it dries and as it gets older. So I ended up with a yellow stain on different pages, not just the page that I colored, but the pages around that before and after that page. Ended up with a yellow stain. I don't know which markers I used, but I will say that from now on, if I'm going to use markers in a coloring book, I am going to be sure to remove that page from the coloring book itself so that it doesn't put that stain on other things. Now, as you may know, every set of alcohol markers comes with an alcohol blender. So this is a colorless blender. Um, it is useful to erase mistakes. It is useful to put in highlights. It is not useful for blending your colors together. Um, if you use this to blend your colors together and you are able to do that, I know there's a few different techniques out there that will blend using this marker. I have never made any of them work. I have tried several, and there's only one that I've made work, and even then it was a little choppy. So um, if you want to see some really good blending techniques as well as what you can do if you are a professional artist or want to have your pages resemble a professional artist. I do believe that Sarah Renee Clark is currently doing a series on markers as well as marker blending and that sort of thing. After you see what I can teach you from a beginner's standpoint, definitely look into that as well as the guest that she had on her channel recently, who does professional alcohol marker portraits and pictures and everything else. The difference between what I'm going to show you and what others can show you is I don't draw. So this is only going to be things that I've either printed out or that are in coloring books that I would use any of these products on. So with that being said, we're going to do a little bit of testing just so that you can see the differences between alcohol markers, water-based markers, water brush markers, and acrylic markers. And then we'll talk more on what we're going to do with these throughout the next month and the different things I'm going to show you how to do. Now, like I said, this is not my comfort zone. This is not where I shine. This is a learning curve for me as I go along. So if you have any suggestions or if you know how to do something a little bit better than I do, please feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below the video, and I will give it a try. I have no problem giving new things a try or new techniques a try. So if you find that you have something that you are able to show me, by all means, show me, because I don't know everything. I have never claimed to know everything. I'm just showing you what I know and how I deal with different techniques and different things like that. All right, so we're going to start with the watercolor markers. I'm going to use a water brush pen to blend. So we've got our water brush pen here, and we're going to let's grab a yellow, an orange, and a red. And we're going to blend these colors into a gradient. Now, there's different ways that you can do this. So you can start with your lightest and go into your darkest, or you can go from there. So we're going to start up here, and we're going to just fill in our area. And as you can see, it fills in quite nicely, like so. So that is a bit of an orangey yellow. Now, once I bring in the next color, oh, shush. my my thingy just made me jump. So as you can see, this is an orange tone. And as you can see, they are blending in to the paper quite smoothly. I'm going to zoom you in so you can actually see what I'm doing. Wouldn't that be nice of me? There you go. So as you can see, they do blend into the paper, soak into the paper quite nicely. I'm not getting a whole lot of lines. And that's one of the great things that I really like about this brand is that it doesn't put a lot of lines on the paper. Now I will show you the back of the paper as well, just to show you that this is not soaking into the paper and bleeding out the back of it. Now if only I could draw a straight line, that would be cool. Alright, so even with the darker colors, I'm not getting any heavy lines, which is fantastic. Now I can blend these colors together as well. So we're going to start with the dark red up at the top. We're going to go into our orange here. Now as you can see, there's a hard line there. In between the two colors. Same with down here, we're going to go in with the yellow. And where I've overlapped, you can probably see a little bit of a line. Now if you take a water brush, make sure that it's damp. Doesn't need to be soaking wet, just damp. You can take your water brush and blend those colors together. See how that eliminated that line? And then we're going to come up in here and we're going to soften that line a little bit. Now the one problem with this is a lot of coloring books are not watercolor books. So when you're using water in those books, you're going to find that your paper starts to pill. That is an issue with water-based markers, and one of the issues with water-based markers that I really don't like is the pilling of the paper. Now, if you use these on a watercolor paper, these are going to work beautifully for you. And basically, so I'm going to show you here how you can drag that color out. So as you can see, we've got a blank spot there, and I want this color to gradient. So move gradiently down into these other areas. Now, if you were using a less porous paper, this would move a little bit easier, a little bit better than what it's doing there. Now, because I've got water there, I can start on this end where that water is and give it more of a watercolor look. And blend that in. So it does make it lighter and it does blend it into the other color. So that is the water-based markers. Now just for the fun of it, I'm going to fill in this last little spot down here just because I want to have full coverage of the squares. All right, so that is watercolor markers. Now, what we're going to do over here is we're going to take those watercolor markers, we're going to take our red, our yellow, and our orange, and we're going to actually do a line here of them being blended together. Now I am going to take my brush and I'm going to put an area of water. Now I didn't wipe off my brush, so it has a bit of that pink in it. And we're going to take our red then we're going to take our orange and then we're going to take our yellow. Oops, I just dropped the see if I can actually put a lid on properly. I just dropped a lid, so I have to get to it. All right, and then we're going to take our water brush and we're just going to blend that along. So as you can see, you can drag that color out and create that yellow, a lighter tone of that yellow as well. If you put the water down first, as you saw in the start, and you're using a watercolor paper, something that has that ability to be a little more porous and be able to hold on to that water without drying out really quickly, it will blend a lot nicer. So that's the water brush pens. So let's put a notation, if I know where my pen is. Nope, I don't. I know I have one. I know I have one. Where is it? There it is. So that's water brush pen. So that's a watercolor brush pen. Now the next one we're going to try and that we're going to use is, and I'm just going to go here. So that's a water brush pen, not a water brush marker. So the next one we're going to do is a water brush marker. And we're just going to use about the same lineage that we did for the water brush pens. And we're going to start with our yellow, orange, and red. Now, like I said before, the difference between these and the water brush markers, of course, is the type of nib that there is. So there's a large felt brush. Now, another thing you will notice with these pens is that they lay down a lot of color, and if you scrub or put too much pressure on your pen, you're going to find that you're going to get pilling in your paper very quickly. So don't put a whole lot of pressure on your pen. Now these ones here I do find don't put down as many lines as other ones. There are some that I have found that just make horrible streaks. And one of the things that I do use these for, and I do find that they work very nicely for, is to do small areas, to blend small areas or to cover smaller areas such as this. With those smaller nibs. So yes, I could have used the brush on that because it was big enough. However, I could also use this smaller nib, put down the ink there, come in with the other color, And then with this color. Like so. Now, as you can see, there is definitely hard lines there. Now, there's something that comes with a lot of the water-based markers as well, which is a blender. Now, that is not my blender, that is a gray. And the blender is the same type of thing that you will find with a alcohol marker. However, this does give you a little bit of blendability. And my blender's missing out of these. I don't know where my indoor blender is, so I will use this one over here. Now this is a Tombow blender. But as you can see, it will soften that line just a little bit and brighten that color just a little bit. Now, the only problem is if you look at the paper, I can feel it starting to give way. So you can tell that the paper is going to start to peel very quickly. Now, another way that you can do that is once again with your water brush. So if you take your water brush and you put down some water here, and you take your red, now again, the paper is not created for water. And then you take your water brush a little bit here. So you will find that your paper starts breaking down a little bit quicker with the water-based markers. You will find that the water-based marker absorbs into that paper a little bit more where you're going to get those lines. Now I'm going to take a little bit more of the water. And we're going to blend in the yellow. So paper is very important when you are choosing the type of marker that you're going to use. As you can see, the paper is breaking down there, and you're getting little pills of paper on the blend. So that is something that you do want to try to avoid. So that is the water-based marker. Now we're going to do a blend. We've done the blend with water here. We're going to do a blend without water here. So don't press too hard and don't scrub too hard. If you press too hard or scrub too hard, you're going to find that your blend or your paper is going to start to peel. And instead of getting a blend, you just get a hole in your page. So be very careful when putting your blends together that you're not putting, see, as you can see there, there's some paper, that you're not putting too much pressure and you're not going over it too many times to get those bits of paper peeling up on you. So be careful of that. And this one here is the water-based marker. All right, so those are the two different water-based and watercolor markers. I don't use these a whole lot. Very, very rarely will you see me use a water-based product. I don't use them because of this issue. The fact that they do peel the paper from coloring books, from things that I would normally use my pencils or my markers in. Um, it does damage the paper and can make a horrible, horrible mess. So those are the types of things that I don't usually use, and I will show you different ways to use them. But it is not something I am extremely proficient in, and it isn't something that I use a whole lot of. Another thing I don't use a whole lot of is acrylic-based markers. Um, so this one here will be for acrylic-based marker. And you can use an acrylic-based marker the same way you use every other marker, just by filling in your areas. Now this one I've done a tip to tip on, so it's got a bit of green on the tip. Now as you can see, it filled in that whole area very, very cleanly. Now these ones here are the Artex acrylic markers. The reason why I like the Artex acrylic markers is I don't have to shake them. A lot of markers have that little ball in it. You got to shake them up really, really good and get them all mixed. Where with the Artex, it doesn't have that little ball. You don't have to shake them. However, you do have to store them laying on their side. So as you can see, fills in very nicely. Now the one thing it does do is it does cover your lines. So if you are going over a light line with a dark pencil or a dark marker like this, you will find that those lines get covered up. Now I'm going to put the white down here and I'm going to show you what I mean by cover up those lines. So if you were to go over that line with a red with an alcohol marker, you wouldn't see it. However, as you can see there, the paint is definitely standing up on that line. Now this is a white. And as you can see, when I go over the black with the white, it starts removing, well, not removing, but covering up that black. Once I let this dry, I can go over it again and pretty much erase that line with this pen. And I do use the acrylic markers as well as the gel pens for that purpose, to help me remove lines that I don't want to be there. Now, as for blending together, one of the great things that I have found with these types of markers is when I'm trying to blend things together, I do prefer to do a tip-to-tip blend. And what I mean by a tip-to-tip blend is instead of, well, this one's already got some on the tip. So instead of just the main color of the marker, as you put the tip to it, it changes the color of the marker. And then you can do a gradient all the way down using up that color until you have the actual color coming through of the marker. Now normally I would scrub that off, but for some reason I didn't. So as you can see, you've got your deep orange up here. As you go down, you've got more of your lighter orange. Now I'm going to scrub off the color that I've got on there so that I've got just the color of the marker, which is more of a yellow. So that's a tip-to-tip blend as you go down. So the way that you do a tip-to-tip blend, and I'm going to show you very, very lightly here. Let's do it with the white just so that you can see the difference. So when you do a tip-to-tip blend, you can take your red and you can go into your white. And you can fill the tip of the pen with your color. And then when you come down, you start off with your deepest area. And as you build, as you move down, that color starts coming out and you start getting the actual color of the pen, like so. So that's a tip-to-tip blend. Now make sure that you go through and wipe off either on paper or just by scrubbing it on a different piece of paper. Go through and get your pen cleaned up so that the next time you try to go use white, it's not going to be pink. All right, so that's all cleaned off now. Remove any bits of paper. The one thing I will say about these types of pens is if you scrub too often, you will find that they do also pill up the paper. They won't do it as quickly as a water-based pen, but they do lift up that paper and they will streak. So for example, if you've got a really dark color, like this dark blue here, and you're trying to cover a large area, and they dry out very quickly, very easily. As you can see, you're going to get those streaks. And I think this one's dried out. I probably used it a lot on something, or the paint isn't moving down very well. There we go, that's better. I think the paint just wasn't moving down very well. And the nibs on these don't last as long as an alcohol marker nib or something like that. Now you can switch these nibs, so you can pull this nib out and flip it around so that you have a fresh nib. But as you can see, I have to scrub quite a bit to get this color down. And if you look at it, you have a lot of different lines. So you can eliminate those lines by going in the opposite direction. So if I've got lines going up and down, if I go this way, it will blend some of those lines out. But again, the biggest problem that I have with this type of marker is that it does lift the paper, and I can end up with a really big hole in the page. So be very careful with that. They do blend fairly nicely with the tip-to-tip blend, and if you do it properly, you can blend them with just going on top of each other. So we're going to take a look at that as well here. So we've got our yellow, our red, and an orange. Let's look at an orange. So we've got yellow, red, and orange. Now, I thought I had another orange one out, but I guess I don't. So we're going to take a look up here with a blend. Another thing about the acrylic markers is if they are wet, like if they're juicy, they do lay down quite nicely. And again, they are opaque, so you can go over things with them. So for example, going over top of that red with this orange, it's going to blend out that orange into a red orange. Now you get rid of that pickup and you go into the orange like that, like that. But as you can see, it's pilling the paper quite a bit. Now yellow, again going over that orange. I've got a little bit of green in this yellow, so it's going to show through a little bit green. Maybe it's just the color of the marker. Yeah, I think it's just the color of the marker. I think the marker is just a little bit of a green color. But as you can tell, I can go over top of that other color and pretty much eliminate it. Like if I go over here, I can pretty much cover up that color with that lighter color. I can go over it, the red with the white, and pretty much cover up that color. So that's what the acrylic markers do, is they do work the same way as an acrylic paint. Okay, and this one is acrylic based marker. Now, I didn't do a large area with water-based marker because I do find that it is very difficult to do. But I will show you, I will do this area here with the water-based marker just so that you can see what happens when you do an entire area. And I'm doing this fairly quickly, just trying to make sure that I'm able to cover the whole area before it dries. Now, if I did this slower, it wouldn't be as covered as that. So let's say I'm doing this area here, and I'm being really careful, and I'm going in and I'm checking to make sure that I have all the areas covered on this side. And then I come over here and I come in. You will start seeing lines as you come through. And as it dries, your lines become more noticeable. So I don't know if you can see that very well, but if you look at the lineage that is showing in there, you will find that there's a lot of streakiness with the water-based markers. Okay, so those are three of the types of markers that that we use for our adult coloring. The last one that we use is a alcohol-based marker. Now, the alcohol-based marker is a marker that does have a pigment with a base of alcohol. The acrylic marker, of course, is pigment with an acrylic base. Water base is the pigment with the water base. Now, the alcohol marker does have a brush nib, or you can get it with a chisel nib. I don't like chisel nibs. I find that they're very streaky. Other people find them fantastic. It is definitely a personal preference thing. Now you can go and cover an entire area without getting those streaks. Now, the reason that I didn't get any streaks is because I went fairly quickly and didn't let those edges dry. So if I was to, say, put down this one here on this area, like so, and I went over here and I put it down here, and then I thought, well, I need to go back and do this side here. Yeah, I need to go over here. As you can probably see, there are differences in color with those. So it is streakier because I went in a streaky motion and did not keep those edges wet as I moved. Now, it also comes with a bullet nib. If you have the brush and chisel, great, you have the ability to do large areas a lot. I like the brush and the bullet because then I can get into those finer details a little bit better as well. Now, we're going to flip this page over and we're going to talk about what is one of the main differences between alcohol markers, water-based markers, and acrylic markers. The main difference is that they bleed through. They bleed. Things are in my way. They bleed through a lot. This is the water-based marker after I put a lot of water on it. Because this is not watercolor paper, it's going to bleed through as well. Now, if I was to put this directly on the page without putting water on it, it wouldn't have bled through. Same with up here and down here. Because I put water on it, it bled through. Now, the acrylic here, which is down here in the middle, as you can see, the acrylic did not bleed through at all. Right here, right here. There's no acrylic bleed through. Right here, and right here. All of that is completely clean. All right, I'm going to zoom you out so that I'm not actually having to move my paper all over the place. There we go. So as you can see here, the alcohol marker definitely bled through. The water-based marker started to bleed through with the more water I added. Same with over here, with the more water I added, it started to bleed through. But that acrylic marker hasn't bled through at all. And the areas that I did without putting any water on it for the water-based markers didn't bleed through. Like this area here, I didn't put any water on that. I just used the marker itself, and it did not bleed through until I started going over top of it. Now, as you can probably see there, you can see a little bit better the streakiness now that it's dry. The way to avoid that is to keep your marker moving and to use marker paper. If you're going to stop and start and stop and start, try to make sure that you're using a paper suitable for alcohol markers. Now, if you're using these in your coloring books, try to make sure that you use them in a small enough area where you can continue moving along. So you can continue building that color without getting those streaks. All right, so we're going to actually do a blend down here. We're going to start with our red. You can also, if you're doing small areas, you can go over what you're doing. Now I'm going into the red with that orange. And bringing that out. Now, as you can probably see, as I bring that orange into the red, it starts lessening that red color. And then the yellow. The same with the yellow. When you start coming into the orange, it starts lessening that color, blending those colors together and making one lighter than the other. And the reason for that is, just like any other medium, when you add a light color to a dark color, it blends it down to a lighter color. Now you can come back through with the dark color and blend that into that lighter color. And get that little bit of gradient blend back. And then you can push it back with your lighter color as well. So when you come through with your dark colors, you can build on top of your light colors the same way that you would build your light colors on top of your dark colors. As you would with colored pencils, the more color you put down, the more the color is going to change. Like so. So as you can see, we've got our dark red, a light red, our dark orange, our light orange into our yellow. So with the movement of the pigment, as long as you keep those edges wet, you can blend those colors together and create that blend. Now the colorless blender, as I was saying, you can use this as a blender and blend those colors together. However, you can't do it once they're on the paper. You have to actually start with it. So you have to put down the blender on your area, saturate that area with the blender, and then you have to come back through with your marker, make sure that that blender saturation is not dry. Come back through with your marker and your next marker. Now that blender saturation, that colorless blender saturation is starting to dry. So you're not going to get the best blending. So you come back through with your marker and then add your lighter color. And just like with the regular blender, the regular blending process, you can come back through and just move it around. With doing that, what it does, as you can probably see down here, is it picks up that color. So the one thing that I find that a colorless blender is wonderful for is for removing color. So say I put this here, let's color this whole area. Make sure that I don't have any streaks, lots of color on there. Okay, so that's a nice deep heavy red color. Now say I want to put spots. Basically what I'm doing is I'm pushing that color out. So this works really good as an eraser. So like for example, down here I've gone over the line. So I can actually remove that with my colorless blender. Now I suggest that you put a piece of paper behind your project when you're doing this, just so that it catches the ink that you're pushing through. When you're pushing through the ink, like you can see here, you will find that if you're not using a piece of paper to catch that ink, you are going to end up with that ink bleeding back through. And always remember to wipe off the color off of your marker. It will stain, and that's fine, as long as when you use it, it still comes through as a clear marker. Now, this the alcohol markers can do the same thing that pretty much any marker can do with a tip to tip as well. So if you want to do a tip to tip, I suggest doing a light and dark. So take your lightest color and your darkest color, and you put the darkest color on the lightest color's tip. Try not to do it the other way around. The darkest color will come down and take over that lightest color very quickly. So even though I'm putting that lightest color on there, by the time I get back to it, that darker color is going to have taken back over. Now make sure that you clean your tip, that you're back to your base color before you put your lid back on. And as you can see, even though I put the lighter color on there, once I let that come back down, it took that over again. However, with your lightest color, if you put a dark color on it and you just leave it sit there, that dark color is going to stain into your nib and possibly change the marker color permanently. So always make sure that your nib is clean before you put your markers away. All right, so this is the blend for the alcohol markers. So this is, where's my pen gone? There it is. So this is alcohol marker. And this is alcohol-based marker. Now, alcohol-based markers are different than permanent markers as well. I don't use permanent markers. The alcohol-based markers are pretty permanent, but there are a type of marker out there called permanent markers that are going to give you a more of a chemical smell when you use them, and if you drop them on something or write on a wall with them, like flipping them out of your hand. I have done that. It sucks. Don't do that. You will find that a permanent marker will not come off, where with an alcohol-based marker you can get those marker streaks off the wall with a little bit of rubbing alcohol. The one thing that I will let you know of, because I keep doing it myself, is keep an eye on the edge of your marker. So if you can see here, this gray line here shows you that it is the bullet nib end. This doesn't have a gray line here, which tells me it's the brush marker end. I keep on trying to get the brush marker and end up using the bullet nib instead. So as you can see, we've got our dark red, our medium red, our orange, our light orange into our yellow. So those do blend together to create other colors, lessening the color. Now, if you're using light colors, you can do a gradient blend very nicely with light colors. So, you can go through and add a little bit of red, add a little bit of pink, add a little bit of purple, add the face tones, the colors of your skin tones and things like that. And you can make a really, really beautiful blend using your alcohol markers. The one thing that I do suggest, especially with alcohol markers, again, is that you make sure that you use the right paper. If you are using these in your coloring books, you are going to be able to do this sort of thing. But you will find that it doesn't blend as smoothly and as completely. You will end up with lines and layers if you don't use the correct paper. The Express It alcohol paper that I use is made for alcohol markers, and what it does is it gives you the ability to it's not as porous, so it has that layer on it that keeps it wet, so it gives you the ability and more time to blend those markers together before it starts getting absorbed into the paper like a sponge. So now, as you can see here, I've got alcohol marker on my table. Now, a lot of people asked me the other day how I remove that from my mat. And just like I do with a lot of things in my art room, I clean things up a lot with these Lysol wipes. And I just go over it, give it a bit of a scrub. And if you do it quickly enough, like the red parts here from doing the dress yesterday, I did not clean my pad quickly enough, and those actually stained. Now, they're not going anywhere. They're on there. And that's because it is a glass mat. And it's not a major thing, but if I was to have gone over it very quickly before I shut down and went off on to do other things, it would not have stained. So as you can see there on the thing, it's picked up all that yellow and that red off of my mat. Now when you come back through, just give it a dry with some paper towel so that you don't get a wet spot on the back of your paper. I'm not too concerned about putting scratches, dings, well, maybe scratches and dings because they show up in the paper later, but stains especially. I'm not terribly upset about stains on my table. So now that we've done that part with the alcohol markers, I'm going to show you a couple of other tricks that you can do with your water-based markers or your acrylic markers. So one of the things that you can do, and this is why I cleaned my palette or my table, is you can put your watercolor marker down on your palette and pick it up with your water brush or your paintbrush and lay down that color and gradiate that color as you move it along, just the same way you would with water-based paint. So the same way that you would pick up paint out of a paint palette, you can do the same thing with your water-based paint brushes. You can lay that color down and you can pick it up with your paintbrush. Now the way that I would clean that up is the exact same way that I just showed you with the alcohol marker, is I would utilize a wipe, clean that off. Now the thing with water base, as you can see, is it comes up very quickly, very clean. So you can utilize that over and over again and still be able to pick up and clean up that yellow. Now you can also use this to clean your brush tip as well and remove any sort of color coming up into your brush tip. Now we're going to do the same thing with this kind of marker. Make sure that that's dry. Now with this kind of marker you can do the same thing. You can put it down on your paper, or on your palette I mean. Pick it up with your brush and apply it just like you would a watercolor. And as you can see, the difference between your water-based marker up here and the water-based marker down here is a major color difference. And that's because of the water lessening the pigment. So when you have more water than pigment, it's going to be a lighter color than if you have more pigment than water, which is directly out of the pen. Directly out of the pen, you will have more pigment than water, where, like I said, when you pick it up with a watercolor pen, you have more water than pigment. Just cleaning my brush, and then we'll pick up what's on there and remove any of the orange as well, like so. And that's pretty much it. So again, the ability to utilize your different markers, and that's still wet, so I need a piece of paper towel, because I'm going to show you that you can do the same thing with your acrylic markers as well. Now what it does with the acrylic markers is it does lessen the opacity of the acrylic markers. So if you feel that you want your acrylic markers to be a little bit more translucent, you can lay down your acrylic marker on your palette, like so. Take your water brush, pick that up, and then lay it down. And as you can tell on the paper, or on the palette here, you definitely have the color there, but on the edges where it started to dry, you can see where that acrylic has started to dry up. And you can just bring that down. Now that's going to be a less opaque than directly from the brush, or the pen I should say. So for example, if I was to go over this area here with just this brush, it's going to cover it a little bit, but it's not going to cover it a lot. Where if I went directly from the paintbrush itself, or the acrylic brush itself, it would be a lot more opaque. So it would cover up a little bit more than if I was to add the water brush to it. All right, so clean off my brush, get all that acrylic off, and put it away. Now I'm also going to show you that with the acrylic paint on the page, if you want to, you find that you've let it sit for a little bit and you don't like how streaky it looks, for example, here. So I'm just going to move this over here. So say this looks a little too streaky to you. You can take your water brush and you can wet it a little bit. And as you wet it, you can just slowly move that marker together a little bit. Now this isn't going to do a whole lot because this has been left to dry completely. But you can re-wet it and move it around a little bit. Now it's not going to do a whole lot, but as you can see, well, actually I don't think I have enough water on there. Let's add a little bit more water. So as you can see, you can move that around a little tiny bit once it starts to absorb some of that liquid. The one thing that I don't like about doing this is it does peel the paper. So all of that ability that you have down here where you've blended without peeling the paper, once you start adding that water, it's going to start lifting the paper and getting a lot more pilly, a lot more ability to bleed through as well as lift the paper. So you lose that heavy color that a lot of times when you're using acrylics that you want. All right, so that I think is going to be it for today's lesson. What we're going to do on the next lesson is we are going to be using the alcohol markers for a start because it is one of the easiest ones to use in a coloring book. So we will use the alcohol markers on the next video. Coloring one of our test pages. So we will do one side of this in alcohol marker and one side in the water-based markers. We will use the acrylic markers for touch-ups and for embellishments only because I find that they cover up, they're a little bit too heavy to actually color an entire page. I have seen it done and it's absolutely gorgeous. I personally am not going to be able to teach you how to do that because I don't know how to do it myself. But I do know how to use it for embellishments and that sort of thing. So that's what we'll be using them for on these two pages, two pictures. So one we will do in alcohol, one we will do in water-based marker. This is again printed on the Neenah cardstock. It is not printed on our alcohol paper. And the reason why I've printed it on the Neenah instead of the alcohol paper is because I want to show you in a coloring book situation how you would utilize your markers with your colored pencils to create that picture. All right, guys, with that, I would like to say thank you all very much for watching. I hope this has given you a little bit of information on the differences between alcohol-based markers, acrylic markers, and water-based pens and water-based markers. So water-based brush pens are a small, very small, little paintbrush with the paint already in the marker or already in the pen, where a water-based marker is going to be larger. You're going to have a larger brush. This is a felt brush. This is not a hair brush or a fiber brush. It is a solid felt brush. And then, of course, you have your fine liner on the end. Fine liners are great for doing a dotting effect. for pointillism and that sort of thing. Those little fine markers are fantastic for that. So those are the two differences between the water-based pens themselves. There is also acrylic markers. The difference between an acrylic marker, your water-based marker, and your water-based pen, of course, is that these are pigment with water, some with a higher pigmentation, like the water brush pen has a higher level of pigmentation than, say, the water brush marker. The acrylic marker, unlike the water brush markers, has an acrylic base to um, the mixture. So it's an acrylic and I do believe an acrylic and an oil. I'd have to look it up for these ones, but it may also be acrylic and water. But it's got a higher adhesion level, so it does stick to the paper really, really well. So even down here where I've added some water, even though it moved a little bit, it didn't move a whole lot. But it will cover your lines and lessen those lines a little bit, especially if you're using a dark color over a lighter line or a really white color like such as here over top of that black line. It does dry very well, and like I said, it does not bleed through until you start adding things like water to it. Even though down here where we added that water, it's the ink coming through from my printer more than the acrylic paint. So that is the difference between those three, is that this is an acrylic marker which has that acrylic paint in the marker instead of water. Now this one here, of course, is the alcohol marker. The alcohol marker, unlike the water and the acrylic, it has a pigment mixed with alcohol, basically a 99.9% isopropyl alcohol, rubbing alcohol. Dries very, very quickly. It has a felt tip, well, kind of a felt tip. These ones here have a little bit of a rubbery tip. The ones for the Cadillac, the Copics, also has a little bit of a rubbery tip. So these have specialized tips made for alcohol markers, or made for coloring with alcohol ink. The pigment in these is very intense, and of course, like I said, they are mixed with alcohol. When you put the marker on the paper, very quickly the alcohol starts to dissipate and it starts to dry, leaving just the pigment on the paper. Now that pigment becomes permanent on the paper. You can't move it a whole lot once you get it down on regular paper. So even if you are going back over it with an alcohol marker, you may be able to smooth some of those lines out, but you also may find that you're adding more lines to it. So be careful, especially on paper that is not created specifically for an alcohol marker. Be very careful with that. Put a piece of paper or the piece of plastic that comes with your alcohol markers behind your picture. Make sure that you protect the page behind the page you're working on, as well as the page in front of it as it dries. Some of the lesser brands do seem to stain or leak a yellow stain on your books as they age. So be careful with that. All right, so I think that is it. I think that is all the information I have about the differences of these markers. Now, like I said, the next video I will be using the alcohol markers on a page, and then we will use the water-based markers on a page as well, and we will finish those pages off with colored pencils over top. All right, so with that, I would like to say thank you all very much for watching. I hope it was informative and it's given you a good understanding of the differences between the 4 different types of markers. And of course, I hope that you have a wonderful day. Always remember that we all start somewhere, and this is just the beginning. Always remember to like, comment, and subscribe to any YouTube artist that you enjoy. And of course, always remember to relax, color, and stay safe, everyone. Until next time, bye-bye for now.